does appear is the Iranian leadership is effectively lining up its dominoes before next week's United Nations General Assembly, which, as you said, is when Rouhani will be making his first appearance as president. So we saw there's been a series of announcements. I mean, they're so quick that it's left all of the naysayers somewhat breathless. We started off with the leadership wishing Jews around the world a happy Jewish New Year via Twitter. We've seen the release of political prisoners, and now we've seen Rouhani sort of, praising President Obama over the flexibility in negotiations and also transferring responsibility for those negotiations from the conservatives within the military to the foreign ministry. And that's a very, very interesting step. But what are we going to see next week at the UN General Assembly? We're going to see what I call a lot of corridor diplomacy, because at the moment there is no scheduled meeting between the American leader and the Iranian president. However, that's not to say that might not happen, and certainly a lot of those American and Western officials will be using next week's gathering as an opportunity to test the waters with the Iranian leadership to see whether in fact they truly are genuine about this change of tone emerging from Tehran. They want to see, are we just seeing these guys talking the talk, or are they really going to walk the walk? But why is it happening now? Well, the reality is money and the economy, and the fact that those years under Ahmadinejad has left the country pretty much close to an economic ruin. It's left it obviously diplomatically isolated, with its closest allies being Syria or Iran, and on top of that it's got those debilitating economic sanctions, which as a result we've seen inflation spike, we've seen its oil sales halving, and of course that is affecting the people on the street, and as a result the Iranian leadership is very concerned that that is only going to ferment unrest and as a result more protests, and that's something obviously they don't want to see happen.
Annette, what about Israel in all of this? You mentioned these olive branches that President Rouhani seems to be extending. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, this is very interesting because it's left Israel in a very awkward position as such, and certainly while there's been a lot of scepticism emerging from Western leaders as to how genuine this change of colour by the Iranian leadership is, no one is more sceptical, or no people would be more sceptical than the Israeli government. We haven't heard officially from anybody in Jerusalem as yet. Certainly Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hasn't really addressed it specifically, but who we have heard from is the chief of the Israel's Atomic Energy Commission, and he was very, very sceptical about how genuine the Iranians are with this sort of, olive branch, and all they're doing is buying time, which is not surprising. I mean, the Israelis have a very fixed position on Iran. They don't want that country to obviously have nuclear weapons, and they'll be doing whatever they can to ensure that they get support from Washington and other Western allies as such. It has thrown a spanner into the works in that part of the world because it certainly was unexpected. But the thing now is that the Israelis will be leaning very carefully and very heavily on President Obama and Secretary of State John Kerry to make sure that there's no watering down of the position as such by the Americans when it comes to Iran obtaining nuclear weapons.